What am I saying again?
This is MPW,
MPW.
the podcast
with your host,
Xylo Aria. Cool.
A podcast about music production
for the everyday musician,
where we learn from experienced studio engineers and each other.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the MPW podcast. I'm your host, Xylo Aria, and today we are talking to Nick Mills. So Nick is a producer, mixer, and engineer, and has worked with so many incredible names, including Kendrick Lamar, Kylie Minogue, Jess Glynn, AJ Tracy, and the list goes on. So such a pleasure to have you here with us today, Nick. How are you?
I'm very good. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. Yeah, real honour to be asked, if I'm honest. It breaks up the norm. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Oh, no worries, no worries. So it's sort of late morning-ish there for you. Has it?
Yeah.
Have you had much to do this morning, or what does your day look like?
Do you know what? Today is lots of bouncing, lots of just admin, sending things off. One of those days. I got in last night, quite late from the studio. So luckily I've got today to just kind of, get on my laptop and do things at my own pace. So it's, not too bad today.
Oh, okay. Good stuff, good stuff. And maybe with those admin days, I'm not sure, but maybe it just ticks off a few projects and get them done.
Exactly, yeah. Just ticking boxes today, which is always a good thing.
Yeah. Nice. So today we are talking about less is more, which is something that I think is can be quite easily lost, especially when you're sort of early in your kind of music creation journey. Always more sounds like more and feels like a good idea. And we will get into that in a minute. But I'd love to hear a bit more about your journey and how you got to where you are today. So can you tell me a bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, like with, I suppose, kind of most people that kind of end up doing this sort of stuff, studio work and sort of being in the music in general, like I started in a band years and years and years ago when I was younger, maybe 15 years old. And then that sort of lasted for about 7 years. We got signed to Mercury for a couple of years. And again, with what happens a lot in that industry, we got signed, then we got dropped. And then it was all a bit, oh my God, I'm going to be, this is it forever. And then obviously reality kicks in and they're like, okay, maybe not. But yeah, kind of carried on production and stuff, on my own, doing stuff, bedroom stuff, working with people where I could. And then just decided I want to get a lot more into the studio stuff and really know the ins and outs. And then finally decided to do like a 1-year course to study engineering and production and stuff, and really felt like I was at home and found, the place I was supposed to be. And I was just enjoying it so much. And
Awesome.
Unfortunately, it was this place called Alchemere in Islington in London. But about 6 months into the course, the school went into administration and went bust and had to close its doors. And I remember being in one of the classrooms and literally someone walked in about 9 p.m. and said, yeah, we've got to get you off the premises because it's illegal in an hour for you to be here. And we were like, what? It kind of felt like a joke. And it was like, okay. But yeah, we all kind of had the rug pulled from underneath us. And yeah, I was at a bit of a loss at that point. I was working in a pub and I didn't really know what to do. And I was like, well, I was kind of cut down in my learning prime, I thought. But, with that kind of adversity, you just kind of have to keep going. And I just ended up flying out emails and knocking on doors and asking for studio work everywhere I could. And to be honest, with not a lot of joy, like it was a long while when, I was doing bits and pieces for free in and around London, and it kind of didn't have much luck, and was applying for jobs on websites, like on Metropolis's website actually, which I ended up working at, but only through chance. I was applying and applying through this website, and it kept crashing and nothing would work and nothing would get submitted, and I was like kind of on the precipice of giving up. And I remember distinctly I was going to meet a friend of mine, and just on the way I bumped into an older friend of mine who I hadn't seen for about 6 years, and we kind of got chatting, and I kind of explained what I was up to, and I was looking for work. And he was like, "Oh, Metropolis. Yeah, no, I used to work. I used to do night reception at Metropolis. I could text the manager. I think she still works there. Let me see if there's any work going." So I was like, "Oh yeah, I guess By that point, I was a little bit like whatever. But yeah, a couple of days later, I get a text from the manager saying, "Yeah, come in. We've got a runner slot available. Let's interview you. Bring your CV." And I was like, "Okay." Yeah, okay. Oh, well, I kind of had to spring back into action, and then went for the interview and got the runner role, and the rest is history. Really, I just sort of started there at runner position, did that for about a year, and just kind of scratched at the door for long enough to someone let me into studios and let me sit and be quiet and try and not be annoying, and then that sort of developed into assisting more sessions, and then then I got a full-time position there. Luckily, after just kind of slogging it out for a little while, and then eventually worked my way up to sort of doing engineering gigs, and then just getting more comfortable with that, and then that was that really. That was kind of where I cut my teeth for. So I was there for about 4.5, 5 years ish, and then just recently at the beginning of 2020, before the time happened, decided to break free and go freelance, just to sort of I don't know, kind of find my feet and do more select projects and stuff, and then. Luckily landed a great gig with a friend of mine now, artist in London called Loyal Kana, and we've been working for about a year together on his latest record. Luckily, keeping us busy through the pandemic. That's kind of brought us up to now, really.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, firstly, when you say things sort of happen by chance, and you didn't really mean for that to happen that way with Metropolis and stuff. But, it's not like you didn't try. And I think that's the thing, is some people might see that as like, oh, your first job was at Metropolis. Like how lucky are you? But it's not exactly that, is it? It's just slogging it out for long enough that something came through.
For sure. Yeah, no, don't get me wrong. There was a lot of not quite as glamorous studios in Metropolis that were giving me work for free before that for a good long while, and then I mean it was in some ways it was lucky, but for sure, I mean I was banging my head against that wall for quite a while. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, right. And how was it working in Metropolis? So, I went there a couple of times, and it's just such a beautiful building, and to work out of there, I mean, must feel pretty special.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a great place. It was a great place to cut your teeth doing this stuff, just because you really do learn kind of the whole breadth of what you need to know about being in a studio. And I'm not talking from the technical sort of point of view. It's more about the etiquette, the atmosphere in the room that needs to be maintained, the high level of service, obviously. And you kind of pick up, the great thing about Metropolis is they will take you on if you have the right attitude, and you can learn the technical stuff. You can sit there and ask questions about the board and learn signal flow and all the rest of it. But, they harbour the right mentality, I think, to be in a room for 16 hours with someone you've never met, and for it to be completely not abnormal in any way. That's what you get used to quite quickly in Metropolis as well, when you've got, high profile people coming in, which it happens kind of so often there because it's kind of got that weight to it. Metropolis people come there because they know they're getting a certain level of service, that you get used to it very quickly, and it trains you very well to be in those rooms. And I think that's something that was invaluable from Metropolis for sure.
Wow. And would you say there's something particular that facilitates that environment where everyone's really comfortable? Because I feel like there's probably settings where it's difficult to get into that comfort zone fairly quickly, and you don't really have time to waste. Everyone's paying for sessions and time and that kind of thing. Can you put it down to anything that makes it that way?
I think that probably comes from that job of an engineer is and an assistant and anyone on those sessions is to make, even if stuff's really hard and there's problems arising, is to make that either go away quickly or go completely unnoticed, because as soon as that's sort of felt in the room, then there's a whole hiccup and it's a domino effect, and then people get stressed and it's like, well, it's money we're wasting here, and da 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 da.
Yeah,
and
right.
that sort of becomes the mantra of anyone working those sessions, is that keep it under wraps. You have to maintain the atmosphere, essentially. You have to let people feel like I've got something to record and it can happen instantly. and then they feel free to think of these creative ideas. And yeah, you're just making sure that they're in that space where they can do that.
Right. Cool. Yeah. Good to know. Good to know. We'll talk about less is more, I guess. And there are a few ways that we can go through this, even in the production phase or the mixing stage and all that kind of thing. But maybe we will start with production. Do you have a sort of typical workflow as a producer, or is it different every time? Or just talk me through what happens when an artist wants to work with you as a producer.
Well, I think it's that thing of reading the room. I think it tends to be really different if you're creating something from scratch by yourself in order to present to someone, or if you're, like you say, if you're with an artist or a band and you're in the room together, and it's about just communicating, I think, at first, and just discovering what it is they're into. Like, you know, you might have your set ways if you're doing stuff at home on your own and you're making tunes, and I've got my template and I start with the drums and that's how I will operate, and You have to be adaptable, I think, when you're working with anyone else, because it's not just you're coming together to create. So it's often enough it would just be a conversation about, you know, how they want to approach it. And you think, okay, well, you know, if you're adaptable and you can work that way, then for sure. If you think maybe that's not so good, maybe we'll start with drums or something, then you could talk to them about doing that. And I think it's just about meeting in the middle. I think adaptability is probably the most key thing when beginning to produce or create with an artist. You have to find out what they want from it, you know, what the end result looks like, and then just discover how you both get there harmoniously.
Yeah. So say if someone wanted, you know, you to start something, so like you were saying, maybe starting something on your own and then presenting it to them, what do you usually get in that instance? Like, do they give you reference tracks, or just a feel, or how does that happen?
I think historically, just when I've worked with people, is normally they'll have a couple of demos or something that they send, and they say, well, I have this song and I have this piece of music, and they'll often send, but I want it to sound like this. So they'll send a reference, and sometimes it's pretty close and sometimes it's leagues and leagues and leagues away from it. But it's fine, because whatever the end result is, you just look at the best way to transform what they have into that, or at least steer it in that direction. Mm-hmm. Or, you know, sometimes when it's, you know, literally making something completely from scratch, I guess it's about doing your research and finding out about that person as an artist, and what their influences are, if they've got anything out currently that you can kind of reference, or they might say, I'm looking for a completely new direction, you know, surprise me sort of thing, which is always fun, but a bit of a gamble. But I think, again, it's communication is key. Just don't leave too much up to chance. Just speak to them and be like, hit me with some reference tracks. You know, who are your favorite artists? Who are your influences? Who do you not like? Who do you want to be like, kind of thing? And then, just go from there.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And when you are creating something for them, maybe they're in the room, or maybe they're not, do you have a sort of brainstorming phase where you just throw down heaps of ideas and then slowly take things away? Or do you just kind of start with one element, add slowly until you sort of get to where you think you're sort of done?
I think it's a sort of a mixture of both. So, you know, you can always recognize when someone is into something you're doing or not. So it's kind of keeping a finger on that pulse. So you might start with one element, say it's drums or something, and if that's not really doing it, you kind of go on that for a while and change it enough, and then just keep, you know, checking back, sort of trying to measure the reaction if the room's feeling it, kind of thing. If it's not happening at all, cool, you move on to some chords. Maybe that's kind of more where these people are orientated. So it's finding whatever the kind of foundation is. Normally it's drums, to be honest, because everyone loves a bit of rhythm, and if that's happening and then you get something solid enough to work with, you just move on to the next thing and start adding elements one by one. I think is definitely the way forward. And then if you are continuing to add stuff and it's beginning to detract from the feeling of what's there, that's always a good place to stop, I think, because you always want to get it to, you know, you're sitting there with a bunch of people, you're not trying to complete the song, you're trying to take something 70% of the way, or less or more, but never 100% because you need to leave room for the singer or the rapper or the band to add their thing. It has to be room for them to put their stamp on it. So you're just trying to create the foundation to which the band will build on, I suppose. And yeah, just be mindful of not crowding it so they can't even fit in.
Yeah. Okay.
My name is Gabby, I'm from Cardiff, and this episode is brought to you by MPW. Did you know that if you sign up for our music production course, you have access to on-hand support from Xylo Aria? This is perfect for you if you've ever wanted to learn how to produce music, but have found the process confusing or overwhelming. As a singer and producer herself, Xylo will give you the support you need to start producing your own music. Take advantage of this awesome feature by using the link musicproductionforwomen.com.
When you feel like a song, or sometimes people feel like a song is not complete and they're like, something's missing, and then the tendency always, is to add more and more. Do you feel like you have a remedy for this or another way of going about it?
Yes, a little bit. I think with this, if you're, and this is sort of speaking just from kind of stuff that I've created myself and learned over time, is if you're adding and adding and adding and you're not happy with what you've got, therefore you're adding stuff to transform and to hit that light bulb moment. If you keep doing that and nothing's really working, then it is, I think, more often than not, it sounds pretty brutal and pretty ruthless, but is to just really take it back to square one, or like almost rip it up and start again kind of thing. And whether that's like change the chords, change the tempo, change the genre, nothing is too major. Do real broad strokes, because if you're building on, the fundamentals that you're not clearly not quite happy with because you keep trying to add to, then change the foundation of what you're building on. There's nothing wrong with that. It's people kind of get sort of invested in these songs that they spent so long, becoming emotionally attached to. It's like, well, I've spent 6 hours on this drum loop. No, that is it. I have to use that. It's like, it's cool. Maybe that drum loop is a mistake. It's still a mistake if you spent 6 hours making it. There's nothing wrong with mistakes. You just rip it up and start again. Don't be too attached to it. Someone a long time ago taught me that, and I was just like, it kind of blew my mind. If it's not happening in 15 minutes, it's cool. You can move on. You just keep doing that. Keep being ruthless with your decision making, and you end up with the best stuff, I think.
So you said if it's not happening in 15 minutes, which sounds like a pretty short amount of time to me.
Maybe I exaggerated a little bit there. So I'm not quite. I think that was a Pharrell quote, but yeah, I wouldn't quite put myself in that pocket just yet. Maybe if you sort of spend long enough, if you're spending hours and hours on something and it's not happening, change something fundamental. Do a broad change and see if that lights the fire again.
And on that, do you give yourself like either time constraints or some sort of constraint to kind of get the best ideas, or not really?
That's an interesting one. Not too much, no. I think again, it's kind of different. If you're in a room with people, then time can often be of the essence because it's money and it's people's time, and you're having to keep energy alive and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I think again, it's that constant shift of, if something's not working, move on quickly until something is, because if you spend hours and hours, EQing your hi-hat, because to you, that's going to be the difference. There's 6 people in the room that don't care about that at the moment. They just want something to happen. They want to keep creating. So yeah, I give myself pretty strict time constraints. If there's other people involved, then, don't get sort of caught up on little minor details that are important to me, and obviously later down the line will be important, but not for the creation process. But if it's just me on my own, then we all fall victim to that. I'll just, I'll start something and I'll work on it for days, months, years, and just if it's something that's for me and for me alone, then I think in an ideal world, no time constraints, deadlines kill creativity for sure, but are important in another aspect. But I'm sure maybe we can talk about that next time.
Yeah, maybe. Okay, cool. So if we talk about from sort of the engineering perspective and maybe mixing and that kind of thing, and I've seen sometimes where engineers are working on a SSL desk and they're just moving the faders to a point where you can't even tell they've moved anything and maybe you can't even hear a difference. But I guess those little changes add up to create the difference in a full song. Is that a skill that you think is built over time, or is there a way to develop that? Because often you're just when you're starting out, you might just be adding until you hear an amazing sound in one element, and then maybe it's just overkill.
I think that probably is something that you develop over time. I think it's more, yeah, it's an experience thing. I think it's an experience and probably trust as well. I think it's you have to trust your own decision making, and if you think about it, 1,000 little minute changes are obviously going to create a huge, great big change at the end of the day. So I think it's about just being really truthful to yourself, trusting your own decision making. Every little move you make, be however minute, you have to ask yourself, does that feel or sound better or worse than before? I think that's what you have to be honest with. And if the answer is yes, then it matters. Every move matters for sure. I think you just got to keep, if you do that, all day and are honest with yourself in terms of what you feel about it, then at the end of the day, you're going to have a great sounding mix to you, at least. And I think that's all you can really hope for. So it's probably something that does come with experience and just kind of trusting your ears, essentially. Does it sound better? Yes, cool. It was worthwhile then, sort of thing.
Yeah. How long did it take, do you think, for you to start trusting your own ears?
Oh, I'm working on it. I think a little while. I think once you've kind of come out of the back of one or two sessions where you do have those sessions where you think, wow, did that just happen? And it does give you confidence. And if people leave the room happy and you leave the room happy, and it gives you that great feeling of confidence, and you think, okay, maybe I do know what I'm doing, because you do end up questioning yourself quite a lot in this industry for sure. There's lots of pitfalls, but yeah, I think that is something that for sure happens over time, building up the confidence and saying, this decision, I feel like I should be making this decision. This is good. I should definitely be adding this amount of volume or putting this on. And yeah, that's just practice, as with anything. Just keep at it, I think.
Okay. Yeah. Good to know. When a song doesn't feel full, do you have some sort of tricks to fix that without adding more elements? Because you'll sometimes hear commercial tracks that have very few elements, but you don't really feel it's lacking anything. So do you have any tricks on that?
Tricks? I keep harping on about this, to be honest, and it's probably getting boring, but I think a lot of that stuff, you hear these songs with 3 or 4 elements, and so much of it is down to the arrangement and the instrumentation, and it's the songwriting, really. I mean, that's the key thing. And as much as I love to big up the tricks in the mix and all the rest of it, it's about stripping it all back, and it's still, you hear some of these songs with just a guitar and a vocal, and it's the arrangement and it's the way things are played that really give it the richness and sound, make it that's so satisfying when you listen to it. It's those fundamentals really that make a song sound full, in all honesty. But if you do end up with something that maybe isn't the best arranged, or the instrumentation's a bit strange to you, sort of thing, a lot of the I'm at the moment I'm really obsessed with mid-side processing. Like I love it. Like it's like a big it just gives you so much to play with your stereo image. Like I'm a big fan of that. That's quite a if we're talking about sort of tricks that make things sound full or wide and big and stuff. Yeah, big into the mid-side stuff at the moment.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's good to know actually, because what you mentioned about stripping things back to the song initially, because I think often we can get a bit lost in the little mixing things and this and that to kind of improve the track, but at the end of the day, if the song is not that strong, then there's only so much that the rest of the elements can do.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. No, it's good to know. It's good to know. When people listen to music, sometimes, as just a consumer of music, you might not realize how much has gone behind every single element of the song, like a tiny little EQ in the hi-hat, like you mentioned. Do you feel like sometimes these decisions are kind of overthought? And is there a way around it? Because, you can often maybe spend hours in just EQing a hi-hat, but when is enough and when should you stop, I guess?
That's an interesting one. Just, I think again, it touches back on this definitely changes as well. Like I was saying before, if you're in a room with people, then and it's not happening, and you are literally hunched over the desk and have been at it for a little while, and everyone's getting annoyed and they just kind of want to move on, then that's when it's enough for sure.
Yeah.
But that being said, starting out doing kind of bedroom productions and making stuff that was really fun and approaching it with that naivety, it is 6 hours on silly little tiny things that, to the average listener don't make a difference. But to you, it's like, yes, that makes me proud of how that sounds. And so there's no saying there's no right or wrong. You can spend a long time, especially starting out, like you were saying, you do that. You spend a long time because you're figuring it out for yourself. And I think that's a hugely important part of learning about making stuff and production and is you have to do trial and error. What happens if I put this on? What happens if I turn this the other way or, reverse this or anything? It's all, you have to be comfortable and free to make mistakes and try stuff out and find out what you do and don't like. So at that stage, when you're first starting out, go nuts, spend 3 days on one loop, on one song. It totally doesn't matter. I think it only really changes when, you're in a room with a bunch of people and someone's paying money and then, the time constraints get introduced. But while they're not really there, spend as long as you like, don't put deadlines on yourself for the sake of it. If you've got the time, you might not always have that later down the line in your career. So try some wacky stuff out, spend a long time doing it. If you've got the freedom to do so, then yeah, absolutely condone it.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Good to know that, people don't feel bad for spending ages and just make the most of it.
Yeah, exactly. Because it might not always be there. So have fun with it while it's there.
Yeah. Awesome. So how do you know when a song is complete? And I'll ask this as a kind of producer's perspective, but also a mixing engineer's perspective.
I think, there's probably a bit of an overlap there because, with mixing and production, they're sort of so hand in hand. I think a lot of the stuff that a mix engineer will do, after the kind of production stage, and there's a bit of a grey area there. But I think from the song's completion, that aspect, I think when a mix engineer or a producer or, whenever I'm able to listen down to the song, over and over again, and there's no desire to add something or change something, that's kind of, especially mixing, because you do really get into the nitty gritties. But if you can listen down and there's nothing that jumps out at you, like that needs to change, even if we're talking half dBs, if there's anything, really, if you're doing real critical listening and you think, no, this is good, this feels good. And then when that's done, I like to do what I call the kitchen listen. So you basically try and not listen as a mix engineer and listen as a consumer or whatever, and basically listen without listening. Go and do something else, put it on loud and go and cook yourself a meal or put the washing on or, whatever. And if it sounds like, I'm still enjoying this and it sounds like a song kind of thing, subconsciously, then you think, I think this is probably done.
Right. Okay. Is there any tips that you have for training your ears for that? Like, is it just through practice or do you have any exercises or something that you might recommend?
Do you know what? Should sound really professional and say loads of exercises, shouldn't I? But no, not at all. I think it's just practicing. Listen, there's definitely something to be said about listening to your favorite stuff using it as a reference track, put it against yours. That's actually one thing that I would say is a really, really helpful thing when you're mixing something. Have your reference track in the session, on mute. Keep referencing back, at what frequency does this feel, full? How do I get my mix to sound like that at that frequency, at this volume? Keep checking back to your reference mix, and it's a pretty good beacon for where you want your mix to go. Have a goal in sight, because that can just help you, really. You're not supposed to know how to make something sound a certain way if you don't know how you want it to sound. So yeah, that's definitely a good ear training thing, is just keep listening, critical listening, really, to other stuff.
Cool. All right. So now a little bit more about sort of career side of things, because I feel like this is interesting to know. And now you've worked with quite a few really well-known artists. And do you have any sort of goal setting process to get to your aspirations, whether it's working with any other artists that you haven't worked with, or getting involved in certain projects?
I think, honestly, if I'm speaking really honestly, I not really. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm always, trying to be aspirational and work with a bunch of other people at all times, because, we like to keep working. But I think I try to sort of advocate as much as possible, being present in whatever project you're working on, and, whatever you're working on currently, whatever it might be, try and be all in it, really sort of live and breathe it. I think that's probably, that enables you to just really do it to the best of your ability and let your work speak for itself. Because, word travels very, very quickly, obviously, in this industry, and, for better or for worse. So if you really focus in on what you're doing at that time and give it your all, then, more often than not, that will lead you to your next project. People either rebook you or rehire you, or speak to their friend who's a musician, and oh no, you should really work with this guy because we had such a good, it was a great success, hopefully, but I think you can only really ensure that when you put your all into the current project, if that makes sense. I'm not saying, obviously, planning is obviously very important, and you need to kind of look to a certain degree to the future, but I try to just sort of keep my head in the current thing that I'm working at, without kind of worrying about the next project or the next two projects,
Awesome. No, that's great. So would you say it's happened fairly organically then?
I think so, yeah. I think obviously kind of working with so many different people at Metropolis, and again, those sessions at the time, they would be everything. You pour everything into them, and you prepare for them, and you make sure things don't go off without a hitch as much as humanly possible. And they come back and they ask for you, and then that starts to become a thing around the building. It's like, okay, cool, a reasonable amount of consistency, and then I don't know, it's one thing sort of leads to another, and then just with this project that I've been on for the last over a year now, it's just because I would always work with Laura Kana at Metropolis Studios, and we became friendly, and then actual friends, and we'd see each other outside the studio, and then it kind of led to this relationship and working relationship that we have now. And it wasn't planned, but you just kind of, I really enjoyed those sessions and gave my all to them, and I think that obviously translated. So yeah, I think definitely an organic growth for me, at least.
That's awesome. That's really great. Yeah, thank you, Nick. That's been lovely. And we actually have a couple of questions from our audience before we finish up. So there's one from Moonling. So Moonling asked, is learning production at a university a must, or can you be self-taught or learn in sort of a small institution?
Not a must, if in my opinion, my humble opinion. All the universities out there now like shouting at me, but no, I think, again, like I was saying, it's all trial and error. Don't get me wrong, like, you can learn a whole heap of stuff, technical stuff, and sometimes a university can fast track you to that, and they have really focused classes, and they can be super beneficial, not diminishing that at all for them, but it's not, it shouldn't be something that holds you back. You can, what is it? GarageBand's free. That's my first ever thing. Cubase actually back in the going back now, getting old. But no, you can get these free DAWs and just start to figure stuff out yourself. And, you know, it all can be self-taught. There's so many, you know, videos telling you tips and tricks and mix with the masters and all of this sort of stuff. And there's nothing stop. The information is out there. That's, you know, one of the great things about the internet is you can find it all out on your own if you need to. But no, I think, yeah, with production especially, because, you know, you won't be able to sit in a production class and fiddle an experiment for 8 hours. Whereas if you do that at home and you're just doing it out of the need to know and the love of creation, then you are more often than not going to create some more interesting stuff, I think. So yeah, definitely not a must. Can be helpful, but do not let it hold you back, because you can get hold of something and learn yourself for sure.
Cool. Actually, do you have a DAW of choice?
At the minute, I'm like a 50-50 hybrid at the moment with Logic and Pro Tools.
Okay.
Yeah, because I think with tracking and mixing, very much Pro Tools based for me, because it's just, the speed at which I'm able to do it is really helpful. With Logic, I think just with, you know, a lot of the VSTs, and it's kind of what I, you know, after kind of Cubase GarageBand and stuff, when I really kind of got into it, it was first Logic. So you always have that emotional connection to the thing you first started creating on. So I'll never sort of let Logic go, really. So yeah, kind of 50-50 between Pro Tools and Logic for me.
Cool. We have one last question from Liz Stolboyer. So she asked, how often do you record your own samples versus using pre-recorded samples?
When I've got the time, I'm big into recording my own samples. I'm like a big fan of it, actually. It's just because I love sampling, don't get me wrong. It's no diss to it at all. But when you have spent time, because often I'll just sort of sit for half a day and make a song that is a pretty wacky song, and it's not something, you know, I would ever sort of show to anyone. It's kind of definitely something in the privacy of my own home, you know, in the style of, say, a certain artist. And then you take that entire song and stick it through Serato Sample or your EXS or whatever, and you chop it up and you make it completely almost indistinguishable that it's you. And you just, you know, you're sampling yourself, your own ideas, and it's a really satisfying thing, because you can get, you know, infinitely creative with it. Same goes for, you know, your one shots and stuff. If you're sampling drum sounds, you can, you know, you're not limited by what someone's given to you. You can test stuff out, you know, oh, do you know what, I want that to sound a bit more ringy or a bit more dead, or whatever, and you do it yourself. And then if you're organized enough, you stick that in a bank on a hard drive, and that's yours forever to use with Trigger or when creating, or, you know, big advocate for creating your own samples, because it gives you a huge amount of freedom. Like, I think a long time ago now, I did a thing for Sample Phonics, which was a pack that was just the funniest thing to make ever. You know, you kind of run around the house with, you know, various bits of kit and just smashing things together, and it's just a load of fun. So yeah, if you're not feeling super creative in terms of songwriting, make your own samples for sure.
That's cool. Yeah, that's good advice, because sometimes I think people can feel in a bit of a rut. So this might be one way out of it, just to have a play around creating samples. Cool, thank you. And just to round it out, if you had one piece of advice for someone starting their career in this field, what would that be?
Oh, one. It's hard. I think be prepared for late nights, definitely, because that never changes. Yeah, I think just kind of be as prepared as you can be going into it. I think because it sounds cliche, but things change really, really quickly, and there is, more often than not, with every other person I've worked with or engineer, you know, there was always that one session, that sort of baptism of fire, where, you know, it was that sink or swim moment where someone didn't show up, or they got asked to do something that was probably way, way kind of into the future. They didn't expect to be doing that sort of thing so soon, and that opportunity may arise. So it's just being prepared for that, because that more often than not is a turning point for lots of people's careers. So, you know, do your prep, you know, kind of always be on standby, you know, no matter what you're doing going into work, you know, act as if you're going to a huge session that it's a big deal. You know, don't, you know, diminish stuff because you think, oh, well, this is not really important, because you never know who the person is that you're meeting and what it might lead to. Yeah, I think, that and late nights. And don't give up. Don't give up because, there's lots of, like I say, lots of pitfalls and times when it gets really tough. But yeah, the next great session is always just around the corner. So yeah, don't give up.
Yeah, love that. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks so much, Nick. It's been a pleasure chatting to you. And I've got a lot from it, so I'm sure our listeners will too. So I will let you get back to your day of bouncing and admin. And and thank you, and have a great rest of your day.
And you too. Thanks a lot.